Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you very much for joining me here today. This is your one-stop shop for cryptocurrency analysis, among many other things. Now we're taking a look here today at Hive, which is interesting the way that it's increased, almost 40% in just 15 to 30 minutes, right? So we want to take a look at this. My community asked me to cover this. Thank you very much to my patrons for checking this out and, kind of just letting me know that we need to take a closer look because I like to exercise, caution in scenarios like these and just make sure you understand best practice. So ideally, you're going to learn a little something here today if you stick around through to the end. But even if not, just know this is not, financial advice. This is for educational purposes only. You should always do your own research. And also note that I have years of trading experience. I've been doing this for a very long time, and my goal is to help make you a better trader so you can trade for a lifetime and not just for one day. Okay? So that's the whole purpose here. And if you'd like, maybe some help with that, I've got a signal group, link in the description below through my Patreon account. Feel free to show your support and learn a thing along the way, right? So that being said, why don't we just go ahead and without further ado, let's just go ahead and check it out. Let's get to it. All right, folks, let's go ahead and take a look at Hive. And before we do, if you're new to the channel, we always look at Bitcoin and Ethereum first to get a baseline of the market so we know exactly what's going on, because if you don't understand all of your angles, it's hard to make an informed decision, right? And why make a decision without all the information? So that's why we look at this here. So first of all, we're going to look at Bitcoin, and just to clarify, this is TradingView.com desktop application. I recommend utilizing, maybe the Pro or Premium version because you get a lot more indicators and you can kind of follow along a little bit better. I do have a link in the description below for that if you'd like to consider, saving some money there. I think there's a referral for, the recommendation. So feel free to check that out. But more importantly here, we're looking at, again, Bitcoin, the 4-hour chart. Now, the 4-hour chart is the most impactful because the fact that the industry leaders, industry standards, are essentially those who utilize this time frame and the moving averages within. The one-day chart as well, but primarily you're going to see 4-hour and the one-day chart being used the most. They also use the moving averages. So the simple moving average of 200, purple line here, and the 50-day moving average, which is this orangish line here as well. Now, to touch on that, the 200-day moving average was rejected about 5 times here on the that was the July 4th, and then previously on the 29th as well. Even though it broke above, it came right back down, bouncing off of 36,500. So that being said, the 200 is working as a major resistance. Presently, the same thing for the 50-day moving average as well, also working as a resistance, but it's been previously support and resistance for a while now, and it's really just this constant state of up and down, news, increase, news, increase. It's just kind of a perpetual cycle here, kind of stuck in, which is unfortunate and lame when you compare it, because we look back here, we see the exact same channels here, right? We got this and this here. They almost line up perfectly. Problem is, this has been lasting almost 2 months, and this only lasted a month. So I guess you could say some people are at a state of exhaustion, present company included. That being said, moving on, that is essentially Bitcoin in a nutshell. What's going on? Oh, I forgot to clarify. We do have a major support at 30,000, major resistance at 42,000, and a secondary resistance at 36,500. Okay. So looking at Ethereum next, basically unfortunately the ugly stepchild right now at this point for Bitcoin, because it's just underwhelmingly performing right now. In other words, we got a potential head and shoulders here, so just be mindful. There's a chance of a reversal with Ethereum. This isn't a full head and shoulder pattern, but it's similar, and it kind of looks a lot alike. So there's a good chance that Ethereum may continue to decrease. I hope it doesn't, just based on the open position I have right now with my signal group. But if it does, I would not be surprised. So just keep that in mind. There is a likelihood that could happen. Furthermore, we've got a support at about 1,700, resistance at about 2,900, and just constant price action in between. Again, the same almost 2 months worth of garbage, at least compared to what we're used to, right? I mean, we're used to Ethereum doing something like this when Bitcoin goes sideways. We're not used to Ethereum doing this when Bitcoin goes sideways. It's just kind of, again, fairly on the ugly side, in my opinion. That being said, let's go ahead and move on to Hive. Now, Hive, we're going to take a look at the one-day chart first to identify, because again, jumping into a coin like this, you got to be careful, you got to be wise, and you got to understand, look at all the angles. Okay, so we always look at the one-day chart to understand its history and to see how, first of all, it responded to Bitcoin sell-offs, but also how does it respond in general? Because history has a tendency of repeating itself, but it doesn't have to. You might hear me say that sometimes, and what that means is the fact that in Bitcoin, or more importantly, cryptocurrency, patterns tend to repeat themselves. More often than not, they do. I would say if it's a percentage associated with that, you're looking at 70-80% of the time, a pattern will repeat itself in cryptocurrency. So if we can identify a pattern on the one-day chart, which is a lot easier to do, then we can understand moving forward how the price might respond to this price action, this recent increase, of course. So first thing first, we look at the timeframes in which Bitcoin sold off. So April 17th was the first major. It's dived down from 64,000 to somewhere in the range of 40, and that was right around here in the 17th. So this guy right here, basically this signifies a Bitcoin sell-off. Now it was already kind of trending down because it had jumped up too high, and it retraced itself. Commonly, you're going to see a retracement about 50%, which makes sense as to why it's kind of coming back down, because it had two really sharp increases. So if you notice, there's a lot of random spikes when it comes to Hive. So increase, consolidation after a 50% retrace. Increase, consolidation after a 50% increase, or decrease rather. So you can kind of see the pattern here. Increase, and then it tries to consolidate. Some kind of big news occurred on the 28th of May, March 28th. And then, of course, we see a sideways action followed by a decrease. So you'll just see these common little heartbeat patterns, so to speak, where it just kind of shoots up and then retraces about 50% of the way down. This here is basically just the response to the market selling off, right? So from 56, up to 64,000, and then all the way down, Bitcoin, did perform similar to this, but everything's going down right now, right? So at least we can kind of see that. Furthermore, just to clarify, it's easy to identify. See that big sharp decrease here? That was May 19th or 18th/19th. Depending on where you're at in the world, that is essentially, the China sell-off, the China one, the big one that kind of impacted a lot of people. So just keep that in mind. That sold off, but you can tell it ramped right back up afterwards. So Hive has a tendency of increasing quite soundly as a result of major sell-offs. So that tells me the average true range should be much higher than it's at right now, or at least somewhere in the range of maybe 50 cents upwards of 65. Okay, so honestly, if those things didn't occur with Bitcoin, just say all the sell-offs didn't happen and Bitcoin went sideways from 60,000 and it's still 60,000 right now, we'd see Hive probably in the range of, again, 50 to 65 cents, perhaps even higher based on the fact that it was doing really well, even when Bitcoin was going sideways. Okay, so just something to note. I like to identify that. RSI is still under 70, which is great. It basically just means there is still room for improvement, but just bear in mind, based on its history, it does have a tendency of jumping up 1 or 2 days and then decreasing. So I'd say best case scenario, we get one more day of increase. Perhaps we see a short consolidation period between now and just say 4 to 8 hours, and then maybe another ramp up, but it will likely come back down. Again, it really depends on how Bitcoin performs, because this obviously does really well when Bitcoin does well. So Bitcoin can rally up to 42,000 or just say past 36,500 and then start trending towards that, passing the 200 and the 50-day moving average. We're going to be looking in pretty good shape to see Hive take off. This is why we always look at Bitcoin first, to make sure you know specifically how this responds. And it does seem to be moving fairly independent, but it's also reliant on Bitcoin. Every currency is, to an extent. MACD, we saw a big convergence back on the 28th. That was this guy here. So again, when you see an RSI under 30, followed by a MACD swing in an upward fashion as a convergence with the 12 swinging upward to the 26, that is what we want to identify, right? These are the things you want to try to find. These are things I look for in my signal group. All right, so that's kind of what you're looking at there. So that's a one-day chart. Let's go ahead and move on. And I mark that just so we can kind of get perspective on what that looks like. Let's go ahead and get rid of this guy here. All right, so taking a look here, obviously we can see the last 4 hours been pretty strong. No surprise there. And let's see, what kind of increase was that? So we went from 32 cents up to topped out about 44. So that's almost a 40% increase in 4 hours. That's pretty strong. I'm surprised the price is still as high as it is right now. Commonly with that kind of increase, we do see a retracement, but it could be a healthy bull run, and we'll take a look at that here in a moment to identify that. But here's something to note, and possibly the reason why it broke above, because this happens a lot. On the 4-hour chart, the 50-day moving average has a tendency of being broken consistently, right? So as you see back here, big surprise, right where the MACD crossed over. On the one-day chart, we saw that increase here where the price just blew right through the 50, okay? Furthermore, look at this. Price blew right through the 50 as well, only on the inverse, on its way down. And now, jumps up over the 50 and tears through. So it's really common for the price to just kind of go hard in either direction through the 50-day moving average. Same with the 200 as well, but it's a little less common because it happens less frequently, right? Because the 50 is responding quicker to the price action based on a 50-day average instead of a 200-day average, right? So that's just something to know. So taking a look at that, that's kind of where we're at. Let's go ahead and look at the RSI. RSI is up over 85. That's a strong indication that it's overextended and overbought, and essentially just one of those things where we just want to be cautious and careful and pay close attention to how the price responds moving forward. All right, doesn't necessarily mean we have to sell, but it is telling us that it's very high, and if we don't see some sideways action for a little while, it will probably start crashing back down. All right, so that's kind of how that works. So moving on to the 1 hour chart, we want to look at the Ishimoku cloud and the TD sequential on the 1 hour chart. That's kind of my favorite primary things to look at. And big surprise here, right? The price is up over the cloud right now. You can see it's trending towards and into the cloud, and then it shot straight through. So look at that. There we go. Just kind of ramped right up there. So that's pretty normal. And if you're new to the channel and or the cloud, Ishimoku cloud just kind of gives you buy signals based on the fact that price being over that. Usually it's a long position. If the price is under, it's a short position, right? So we look back here. This was a short position. This is a long position. And obviously we come back here. This is where the 1 day chart gave us a MACD indication of a buy signal. Big surprise, it jumped right through the Ishimoku cloud right here. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at there. So that's how the cloud works. It's fairly reliable too. So just utilize that as often as possible, but just know it's best on the 1 hour chart. Other charts can give you some false signals. 4 hour 1 day chart might be a little too slow. We need it to respond a little quicker, and the 1 hour chart I feel is the best. It works the best for me. Moving on to TD sequential, and this is going to be kind of, really null and void for the most part, just based on the fact that it just ramped up. But simply put, TD sequential, if we're looking for 9s here, right? In other words, when the price goes up to 9, it typically signals a reversal. And right now we are at a 5, so there's a chance that we'll see continuation for at least 4 more hours before we see a reversal. Because what this does is tells us if the price is considered, if it's exhaustive or not. In other words, if the markets reach exhaustion, there's a state of exhaustion that happens, within 9 time frames. In other words, within 9 candlesticks. This can apply to the 4 hour charts and the 15-minute chart, even the 1 day chart. I prefer it on the 1 hour though. It makes, again, the most sense for me. So just something to pay attention to. There's a chance that we haven't reached exhaustion yet, based on the fact that we're only about 3 hours in to this significant run, maybe 4 hours, right? So something to be mindful of. Furthermore, we're looking at the 15 here. This is going to be also really, when we use these indications on a situation like this, that's why I like to look at the big picture and work our way down. Because looking right here at, just say, the VWAP and or the exponential moving average, those are my 2 favorite indicators in the 50-minute chart. They don't really give us the best indications right now, based on the simple fact that it's a really strong ramp up. And with this significant gap up, look at that. In 15 minutes, the price jumped up, no joke, 31%. Okay, and is still continuing upwards at this point. So these indications aren't really going to tell us too much. Yes, the price is over VWAP, which is a good sign. That's a good signal to consider entry. It's also over EMA, but they still haven't had a chance to catch up, right? That standard deviation is so far that there is essentially no real, the data is skewed or flawed, if you will, right? So oftentimes when you see this, you have to go down to the 1 minute chart. So let's go ahead and do that just to kind of get a quick perspective and see what's going on. And you can kind of see here, again, a little bit better averages with the VWAP. It is working as a support. EMA is kind of jumping up and down, but that's kind of normal for a slight consolidation period that we're in right now. But currently, at this point in time, the price is over EMA, so it could potentially be a buy signal. What we want to look for is higher highs and higher lows. So we do see some higher highs back here. Then it tapered down. We got lower lows. This is a higher low, higher low, higher low. So in essence, we are trending. So if you were to kind of just cut this in half, this is a much better half. This is the bullish half. This is the bearish half. So there's a chance it could continue upwards. So again, something like this, you want to be very cautious, very careful. I do not like taking entry in scenarios like this personally, just because there's too much risk involved. So if you were to take entry, please do yourself a favor, wait for the price to be over EMA and VWAP. Furthermore, always make sure you set a stop limit and or a stop loss, something that is right at the VWAP line. In other words, if you're going to take entry now, set your stop limit right here on the VWAP to ensure that you don't lose a ton if you were to get stopped out, right? Or just be vigilant and pay close attention while you're here and make sure that you understand that there's a chance this could come crashing back down. Again, just because it has a history of doing so, right? History doesn't have to repeat itself, but it oftentimes does, okay? And that's what we're going to see here, potentially. I hope I'm wrong and that it continues to go sideways and upwards, but I kind of feel like it seems a little on the overextended size, and it would just be something that I'd personally want to avoid. However, if you are the kind of person to gamble, which I don't recommend doing because trading is not gambling, then perhaps consider taking entry. Just take a small position and see where it goes. I know you probably kick yourself if you take a small position and it keeps coming up, but just bear in mind, this has a history of 1 or 2 day runs and then turning right around to retrace 50% of where it came from. Right? So just please understand that moving forward if you're to consider taking entry. To me personally, it's not really worth it at this point in time. But again, I prefer to have certain victories, so to speak, instead of these uncertain gambles or risks. Right? It's not my risk tolerance to do this. All right, so hope you found benefit from this. Please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. If you're a current subscriber, thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Feel free to check out my Telegram community too. Got a good group of folks there. You can learn a lot. I also have a signal group as well, where I send 3 to 5 signals per week, just allowing you to find good entry points. And I utilize all the things I just showed you here in my analysis before I take entry, which is why we currently have between 85 and 90% success rate. So it's going very, very well at this point. So we'll go ahead and continue that. And I really appreciate you nonetheless checking this out. Thanks again for watching. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And we'll see you in the next one. Take care.